So Indian is saying goodbye to the FTR. The Indian FTR. This is the Carbon R edition, 1200 cc V-twin with the Acura exhaust, all kinds of nice carbon bits on it. Brembo brakes, LED headlights, trellis chassis. We're going to take this for a little test ride today. I rented this bike through an app called Riders Share, and it was pretty easy. You know, I've used Turo a bunch of times for cars. This is the first time I've rented a bike, and I wanted to go through that process and see what it was like. So yeah, I'll do another video where I talk a little bit about renting a motorcycle. I've got a single Öhlins back here. Looks like it's manually adjustable. Probably, I'm guessing the Öhlins up front. Or is it a Showa? Let's see. Oh, it says Öhlins right there. And the Brembo steel braided brake lines. Beautiful looking bike, isn't it? Isn't it handsome? Now this is a stylized flat track, like an homage to the American flat track racer. And these have been out for a while, but they just announced that they are discontinuing this line. All of the FTRs will be phased out by the end of 25. And so you better, get them while you can, because they are on the chopping block. One thing I thought was interesting on this bike is that it has a touch screen. So check this out, a touchscreen dash. If I go into modes, I can go to rain, standard, and sport mode just by touching the screen. That's pretty cool, huh? It's a basic, I don't know if I would call this really high def, but it's full color. But I thought it was pretty cool that it has the touchscreen. You can also navigate through the switch gear, and then also from here, and then touch it. So there's multiple ways you can adjust your ride modes and get into the settings and everything. Now, one thing about this bike, it's 120 horsepower. But one thing about it is she's got a little chunkiness to her. This one here is 518 wet. So with gas, oil, cooling fluids, she comes in at 518 pounds. And that is, my friends, quite a chunk of machine. Where is the weight on this thing? Like, look at the chassis here, the swing arm. It's all like a big tubular. I'm guessing this big V-twin is quite the chunk. It looks like it's a stressed member of the chassis. It's got quite a long wheelbase. I think it's a 60-inch wheelbase. 120 horsepower, like 82 foot-pounds of torque. So she's a torquey machine. Let's see if we can feel that weight. Let's go for a ride. Okay, riding the Indian FTR. The big honkin' V-twin, 1200 V-twin, American, baby. Oh yeah, she's got the Acura exhaust on her. She sounds mean. Off we go on the FTR. She's got a deep sound to her. A big V-twin. Okay. So, first impressions right out of the box here. It's It's a comfortable riding position. It's very, how would I describe it, like authoritative. You know, you really feel like you're in command of the bike. Go through some corners here. Yeah, she is a heavy girl. Okay, so there was a little S-curve back there, and you could definitely feel the weight. She went through there very sluggish. The seat is very firm, but it's wide and very comfortable. It almost feels like a touring seat, but it's on the firmer side. I like how it feels. I like the seating position. The foot pegs are pretty much right below you, so you get a very standard upright feel to this. It gives me, right off the bat, it gives me like cruiser vibes. I'm definitely like, it just feels like a cruiser. Oh, you know, that's weird too. So I shifted upwards a little bit. There's a little bit of a hump on the seat towards the tank. And now that I've found that, it's really strange. Like you can't sit up on the tank. And where my knees hit the tank isn't like a very natural feeling placement. It's a small thing, but if you ride one or if you sit on one or something, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. If the pegs were back further and you had more of an angle, you could get underneath that tank hump, and that would be much more comfortable feeling. But it is what it is. The bars are pretty high, so I'm very upright. I'm getting a lot of wind right in my chest. The seat height is, you know, I think average. I can flat-foot it. I'm 5'10". There's a little angle to my leg. So I've gone 10 miles. This tank only holds enough gas for 100 miles, so I'm down to 91 miles already. I've been on it for 10 minutes. Definitely not something you'd want to throw luggage on and do any kind of long distance. I'd hate to have to stop every 100 miles. Oh yeah. Yeah, she jumps up to 60, no problem. All that torque. She goes. That was only half twist of the throttle too. That wasn't bad. That wasn't bad at all. That V-twin torque, baby. Okay, we're gonna head out into the country here a little bit. Hopefully get away from the cars. So, one thing I noticed about this bike is it does not have a quick shifter, which, if you're used to one, it's funny going back to a bike that doesn't have one. Not that I'm complaining, I like shifting gears with the clutch, that's cool. So red line on this, on the tach, shows 9,000. But it doesn't really feel like it wants to get up there. It's fighting me to get up there. It feels happier down in like the 5 and 6. Well, even at 5, it starts to complain a little bit. Yeah, she definitely likes to go through these corners nice and slow. A lot of that isn't just the weight, it's that long wheelbase. The Brembo brakes on this bike feel very spongy, and I don't know if it's just the bike. Maybe it needs a little maintenance. Oh yeah. All that torque. She gets up and goes. 120 horsepower, like 82 foot-pounds of torque. That definitely felt nice and strong. And no complaints there. It's I would call it a pretty quick bike in a straight line. I wouldn't want to push this through the corners too hard, to be honest with you. I think it's just too much mass. Oh yeah, there's something. The brakes need a little work. I don't know why they're so spongy. Oh, look at this big hole in the ground. Eesh. So the more I ride it, the more the seating position is kind of weird to me. So I'm getting so much wind, especially on the highway. I was getting so much wind that I was leaning into it, right? Because it kept pushing me back. The triangle, the rider triangle, is just a little strange. But it's probably something you get used to. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Okay, this bike moves. Yeah, this bike, she will get up and go, man, I tell you. I wish the brakes were better. Give me a little bit more confidence. They're so spongy. It's almost like there's air in the lines. The clutch feels nice. The transmission feels nice. There's no complaints there. Engine characteristics. It's a lot smoother than I thought it was going to be. When you just do a roll-on like that, it really just goes. You gotta love torque, don't you? You gotta love torque. There's something burning over there. Yeah, this is... You gotta throw the anchor out in the corners on this bike and then nail it. So a lot of times on my test rides I talk about bikes that you know, are comfortable right out of the box, where you feel like you've been riding it for a year after like 5 minutes. And this is one of those bikes. Anybody could ride this bike. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Thank you. Okay, what haven't I talked about? I think probably the suspension. The suspension is surprisingly firm. Surprisingly firm. I'm just in road mode. We'll change it to sport mode here in a minute. See what kind of difference that makes in the throttle mapping. You have to be pretty firm with the gear shifts. I've had a couple of times where it didn't want to go into gear. You have to, you know, it's an American bike. You gotta use some force. Be a man. Oh, actually I am in sport mode. It says sport right there. So I've been in sport mode this whole time. Yeah, so the suspension, it is, you know, like I said, it's surprisingly firm. I'd like to play around with the settings on it though, because it feels like you could have a little bit better rebound on it. See how the dive is on it. You know, the dive isn't that bad. I don't know, maybe the owner has this set up pretty firm. I don't know if it's right out of the box like that. Probably because of the weight, they have this set up pretty stiff. Oh, it's nice getting out here in the country. Not very many cars, just cruising on a beautiful Saturday. It's a little brisk. I think we're up to like 60 degrees. The dash doesn't give you a lot of the real modern functions like compared to my Triumph. Now, one thing the owner was telling me is that it has a feature where it will deactivate one of the cylinders at a stop. So if you're at a red light or a stop sign or something, it'll cut one of the cylinders off to bring down emissions while you're, you know, idling. But he says he doesn't like keeping it on because when you go to take off from the light or the stop sign, it sputters and vibrates and it's just not a nice feeling. But it's kind of interesting that it has that feature. So Indian is saying goodbye to the FTR. The whole FTR lineup too. I think there's like 4 or 5 different trim models. And you know, I gotta say, I'm kind of sad to see it go, because from the American manufacturers, being Indian and Harley, you don't have a lot of choices other than big, expensive, giant cruisers and tourers. There's Harley's Pan America, which is an adventure bike, and I guess that's doing okay. That's a hot genre in motorcycles right now. But in terms of like more sporty standard bikes, there's not a lot of option there. So the FTR was something that was unique. I think it's a really good looking bike. I think it's a great bike to go for a Saturday motorcycle ride out in the country. I wouldn't get it if my intention was to really go ripping around with my buddies. This is a cruiser with some oomph, you know, cruiser with some attitude. some American styling. I like that. So yeah, I'm sad to see it go. But like Brian and I were talking about on the podcast this week, when we brought up the news that it was being discontinued, you don't see them around. You really don't see them on the road. And I think the reason why, and that's a pretty big topic, but you know, people who are into American motorcycles are going to go into the cruisers and the touring bikes. There's so much of an established market with the European and Japanese that it's just too hard to look at something from the American makers. If this bike had been 60 pounds lighter with the same engine, a little bit shorter wheelbase, maybe it would have, you know, started pulling some of those riders who are going and looking at the MT-09s and the MT-10s and the speed triples and the street triples. I think that people saw this and they're like, you know, hey, it's cool looking, but it's very expensive. The MSRP on this bike is over $17,000. And it weighs over 500 pounds. So, you know, I saw a commenter on a message board, or not a message board, a video the other day, and he's like, you know, that's typical Harley and Indian, where they'll give you a standard sportier bike and then they'll overprice it and make it too heavy. But I don't like seeing bikes, you know, like this go. But it's going. So if you want to get one, now's your chance. Or pick one up used for an awesome price. I think if I got a really, really good deal on this, and I just wanted a weekend cruiser, and I wanted something unique, something not everybody else had, this is a great bike for that. It's a pretty comfortable bike. Easy to ride. There's something to be said about the American flavor of this bike. The V-twin, the Indian heritage, the flat track styling, all of those things very, you know, very much part of the American motorcycle landscape. It feels very American. It doesn't feel like a bike that's trying to be Italian or trying to be German or trying to be a Triumph or anything Japanese. This is very much its own thing. Yeah, she goes. All right, well, I thought I'd end this the same place that I started. And, you know, I have to say, I had a nice, pleasant ride on the Indian FTR 1200 Carbon R. It's a cool looking bike. You got to give it that. It's got tons of torque. It's a nice bike to ride. Engine's fantastic. The suspension's nice. But you do have to know that it's really a standard type of cruiser. It's a standard bike with attitude. I like it. Would I recommend it? Would I recommend you going out and buying a used one because Indians decided to get rid of it? Well, or maybe get the last one at the dealership. It's hard, I think if you're more of a casual rider and you just want a weekend bike to go have lunch with your buddies or go out to breakfast with your buddies, you're not going to ride real crazy, but every once in a while you'll give it some gas on a straightaway, then sure. And if you like that American thing, right? It's the American dirt track, flat track racer. It's V-twin. It's Indian. I get it. It's a thing. It's a cool bike. It's a cool bike. If you could pick one up for $6,000, I think you'd be really happy with it. Would I pay 17 for it? I guess not a lot of people did, because maybe that factored into why it's discontinued now. So anyway, I'm going to leave it there, guys. Leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't. See you next time, guys.